Hello, and welcome to Bare Necessities. My name is Bear, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a retrospective on my experience with Origins over the last year. Origins launched on June 19th, 2024, so it's been about 13 months since the initial launch. How have things gone? Well, at first I was going to go through each expansion and discuss the whole journey, but really I think I'll just talk about the things that have gone well and what has not gone well. Let's start with the things that did not go well. First, let's look at bugs. While I think bugs were pretty expected for Origins, the sheer amount of bugs this server has experienced over the last year is immense. As of July 17th, 2025, when I recorded this footage, there are over 230 recorded bugs on the bug report section of the forums. 13 pages. There's obviously a number of duplicates, a number of things that aren't bugs, and some things that have been fixed but the team hasn't moved yet. But over 200 bug reports is crazy to think about, with some of these things still broken 13 months later. And while I don't want to go over all the small things, I did want to categorize some of the big things that have really plagued Origins up until this point. Number 1. Main quest timelines broken. In Shattered Lands, it was months before people could finish By Hook or By the Heritage quest. In Desert of Flames, people couldn't finish access to Djinn Master's Prism for weeks, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. And finally, in KOS, the Claymore quest has been broken in multiple ways at multiple different times for multiple different reasons. At first, it was stuck on the Riddle of the Vault for weeks. Then it was stuck in Palace of Awakening for a bit before being hotfixed. Now, Palace of Awakening is broken again, after a number of people have already finished their Claymores. These are some of the primary quests everyone wants to do when an expansion comes out, and for them to be broken for weeks and months is absolutely insane. Currently, you can't finish Betrayal quests on Origins either, which is a huge deal for Dozeker, the Origins PvP server, where faction swapping is something integral to the PvP experience. Number 2. Raid content completely missing. At the beginning of Shattered Lands, there were 0 raid mobs in Spirits of the Lost, which is pretty much the pinnacle raid zone in classic EverQuest 2. Once that was fixed, one of the raid mobs still didn't appear in the zone 6 months into the server's lifetime. In Desert of Flames, the dragons didn't spawn in Pedestal of Sky, thus blocking access to the Djinn Master's Prism. And in Kingdom of Sky, Terranax wasn't spawning in Death Toll, the final boss of the expansion. Halls of Seeing had a broken script where you couldn't even get to Vinicor. We spent literally 30 plus minutes checking for weapon racks thinking we were just missing it, but nope, it was just bugged. RIP 5-day lockout. Number 3. Mechanics broken. First, crit chance is currently broken. Offhands don't crit pots don't actually give crit that they're supposed to, Mark of Awakening necks don't actually increase your crit chance, procs don't crit if you have the correct crit chance for that proc, resists and mitigation are broken, all of the resist types, including physical, were merged, so the amount of resist and mitigation that you get are insane, making content hit for way less than it did originally. Finally, the dev team added an Aegis buff to certain mobs as kind of a workaround to add specific resists to certain raid mobs to make them era accurate. And while an attempt was made, Aegis didn't actually add resists, it just added damage reduction. And with all the resist types being consolidated, this made for some terribly tedious encounters. For example, Vinicor and the Amorphous Drake literally take 0 physical damage, when they were supposed to only be extra resistant to specific types of physical damage, like crushing or slashing or piercing. And keep in mind, like I said, extra resistant. Currently Aegis is not debuffable, so it's just damage reduction. Certain dragons are taking like 15 plus minutes to kill only because of this buff. So yeah, things have been pretty broken on these servers, and not just little things. We're talking major bugs taking long lengths of time to fix. Secondly, let's talk about #NotClassic. Origin servers are definitely not classic. While advertised initially as code from 2006, it's really code that was pushed into the existing codebase, then conditionally using Origin's values for things, versus live or TLE values. I do think the databases may be separate so that the items and spells are their classic counterparts, but mechanically, the game is so different from classic. For example, main hands can be wielded with a dual wield offhand. This totally affects the balance of all scouts and fighters. Also, they added a small haste penalty when dual wielding, so that helps a bit, I guess, but it really does make things like rogue AA to use a main hander versus 2 dual wields way less desirable when you can use a main hand and also a dual wield offhand. It also trivialized a lot of the initial heritage quest items that were dual wields with super low delays. I also mentioned it before, but resists, specifically extra physical resists, are so utterly overpowered and broken that a pair of shoulders from DOF will likely be the best in slot until ROK or further on. There was also a lot of other small things like no discovery AA being given until Desert of Flames, and AA not giving AA from like names and things like that did back in Classic. Honestly, it spurred a ton of discussion in the community as well as to what is Classic, what isn't Classic, and does it even matter because of how unclassic this server actually is, which I think brings up my final thing that hasn't gone so well. Is Origins just actually another TLE with a different spin? If things aren't classic in balance and itemization, is it just another TLE with the old gear and spells? I think a lot of people are finding that to be the case, and if they haven't yet, only time and more experience with the server will actually get you to this point. Then that begs the question of why do I spend so much extra time and effort to level since leveling is noticeably slower on Origin servers just to experience another TLE. The old TLEs take much less time and effort and honestly are more challenging in some ways. The raid encounters are tuned up with extra potency and hit points that require you to be more careful, even though you're doing more DPS. This is what I think has been the straw that's broken the camel's back for a lot of players who eventually left Origins. Alright, enough doom and gloom. I'm still playing on Origins, but why? What is keeping me here even after all the things that are happening? Well, let's dig into it a bit. Classic stats are actually pretty cool for the classes I chose to play. I have primarily played a swashbuckler, and I have enjoyed itemizing in such a way to cap my strength, then work on int to increase my poison damage, or stamina and agility to improve my survivability and power. Getting an item with flowing thought, or a cool proc or effect, really feels good. The power creep that exists on non-Origin servers isn't here. It's more simplistic, while also allowing more creativity in how you gear your character. Balance. Yes, I know I mentioned above that balance isn't classic, and it definitely isn't, but right now in KOS, balance feels pretty nice. While a swashbuckler and warlock may wreck the trash parses, assassins and necros may destroy certain named. Overall, the disparity between DPS classes is not as vast as on other TLEs, so raid comps are much more diverse than normal live TLEs. And nostalgia. Origins, like every other TLE, is a huge dose of nostalgia for me. I like going through the old zones again, and I think the leveling speed on Origins really does let you dig into mini zones while leveling. It also feels like a journey. The weeks it took to get from 1 to 50 were really enjoyable, and I have very fond memories of each day leveling with old friends and new acquaintances. Also, one of my really good friends from childhood came back to play the game with me on this server, and we played on live together growing up in high school and college. He recently passed away after a long struggle with cancer, so being able to relive those glory days with him will always be something I cherish and something he enjoyed immensely in his final months of life. Finally, community. The community in EverQuest has always been outstanding. While there are a fair amount of notorious figures, the community loves the game and wants it to succeed. They want new players and old players to be able to experience all the good things that this content has to offer, and I hope the community continues to voice their opinions and fight for support for this honestly very niche MMO. Thanks for watching y'all, and I hope to see y'all later.